Thanks for tuning in to the World XP podcast. If you're enjoying the content, please drop us up, drop a like, and let us know your thoughts below in the comments. Also, please consider supporting our podcast via the link below. It really helps us out. CJ, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm blessed and highly favored. Thanks for having me. How are you doing?
I can't complain. Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. Let's do a quick intro, and then we'll jump into what we were talking about before with technology. And I think because it'll be a good segue into the conversation. So let's do a quick intro for the people that maybe don't know who you are, and then we'll hop right into it.
Yes, no doubt. CJ Sapong. I am currently a free agent. Played professional soccer for 13 years. Definitely exploring the entrepreneurial, philanthropic space and figuring out what's next. But have been very blessed to be able to play the game for 13 years, obviously many years before that, and travel to different cities, meet different people, and ultimately have it, spur my movement beyond and, my journey towards, maximizing myself and, those around me.
Yeah. So I think in terms of maximizing things, we were just talking before about technology. We had a bunch of technological difficulties sitting there, video delays, audio, weird things. And you were mentioning, and I completely agree, that technology is supposed to be going in this direction where everything's supposed to be getting faster and lighter and smaller and better. And what I was going to mention before I was like, let's just get started is one, in football or soccer, we see the same sort of thing, the increase of technology with data and stuff in the game. But also, like, I feel like we're in this weird stage technologically where, yeah, things are getting faster, but also we're at I don't know if bottleneck is the right word, but we're right on the cusp of like a breakthrough for everything. So we've got old infrastructure with the new technology, and some of the old infrastructure can't take the new processing speeds and things like that. And so you end up in this weird mix of old and new, and the new, like the old infrastructure can't handle the new stuff. And then it just seems like things are breaking all the time. But yeah, that was the thought that I had before I was like, let's get into it. So I
I
don't know what
think,
you
yeah,
think.
yeah, no, I think I was kind of coming to that conclusion as well. Like I figured, especially with the new update that Zoom just, passed on, I imagine it's probably tough for these companies software wise to be able to, continue to keep the range of platforms, whatever infrastructure that's out there that can actually facilitate the software. Things are moving so fast, definitely from the software standpoint, but yeah, it seems like our devices. I mean, I have a an iPad. It's like I forget what generation. I got it like 6 years ago, but I remember getting it, and I just kind of like traveled to that time and how innovative it was then. And I said, "Damn! Like, have we moved to a time where in 6 years technology is outdated?"
Yeah, well, we have
And
is the
and, and,
short
and
answer.
the wildest part is now what gets tricky is because these companies are trying to sell stuff, they are doubling down on this. They probably have the iPhone 25 on a shelf right now, just collecting dust, just waiting,
Yeah.
you know.
And then you
But
look at AI as well and the amount of energy that it takes to run like these big AI centers and stuff. Like the energy production and output is like we don't have the energy bandwidth for that, and the electric cars, and people always hear about like crypto mining and stuff, how much energy it takes. It's like we're getting into a place where the amount of energy that we need to actually use all the new technology is like we don't have it yet. So we're in this weird, yeah, technology is moving too fast for the rest of it to keep up. It's super interesting for sure. How was it like in when you were playing in MLS, like from when you first started to I think last season you played in Nashville, correct? So what was it
Nashville
like?
then traded to Toronto.
So, okay. So Nashville, like from the beginning to Nashville, Toronto, like what did you see with the evolution of technology? Because I feel like that was the big, like when you were playing was the big boom in data analytics and all that stuff. Like we saw it previously with baseball, like the early 2000s Moneyball and all that stuff, but I feel like the last maybe 10, 15 years is when soccer has really try to do that. You see everybody wearing the GPS trackers now, whether it's Stat Sport or Catapult or one of these other ones. What was your experience with that? Getting used to it, being able to use it for your own career? Like, oh, I ran this many high intensity sprints and it did this to my body. Like, what was your experience
Yep,
with that?
yep, yep. I think the first what you got to realize is as data and technology improves and increases, there's multiple players at different angles of that. So if you see it as the piece that's in the middle, there's the person that's going to be utilizing it to make money. There's going to be the person that utilizes it to enhance a process. There's going to be the person that is the subject, right? And I would say the last 4 years, it's taken a crazy step. The like 9 years before that, because I was the subject and thought as such, it was fleeting. I didn't think about it. I come in, okay, the numbers say this, the numbers say that. I knew how I felt, and it felt because I was also young and just honestly gifted in athletically gifted. Usually, it served as a tool to justify me, right? Like I did see it for other guys become a tool that may have kept them off the field. So in that regard, it was a different experience for me. But once I got to Nashville and I recognized, we had an exercise science guy who studied, exercise science like it was his job. He loved it. He was always looking at, finding the new innovative things that were out there. And, it put us in a position where I would say we should have been we should have benefited more than we actually did. And this is where the adverse comes in with data. Now you're being viewed at a level that's very different and not as understood, right? The exercise science guy who knows this material, and he's the one who's talking to Catapult. He's the one who, is setting the GPS up, this, that, and the other. When he tries to explain it to the coach, who's an old school guy from the UK, who's never heard of nothing like this, but is part of this club now and has to incorporate it in his process, I think it can muddy the waters a bit. You know, there were moments where, sometimes somebody's watching the pad that has the numbers, but not watching the game. You know, and then on the flip side, there's guys on the field where it's like, I might have not ran enough at training today. It's towards the end of practice. Let me just do this sprint just so the numbers can get bumped up a bit. So it's like ultimately what it comes down to is like one, somebody's watching, and two, somebody knows they're being watched. And then that brings, I think, more of an individual experience, more individual, like it exposes you, right? I'm somebody that always worked hard anyway, so it didn't bother me. But like if you're somebody who knew that you might every so often cut corners or not track back when you needed to, it held you accountable. And that sounds good, but in the grand scheme of it all, if I was to look back in those times, it didn't translate to results.
Yeah.
So it just depends on what the reasoning, like what are you trying to get out of it? And we've talked, but this is a mindset that I'm trying to incorporate in my life and in my business, the things that I do, is like being able to understand what goals we're trying to get out of, because you can easily say, oh, we need to be in the seventh percentile of this output because all the top teams are in this. Okay. But there's 10 other departments that go into that team and how it's built and how it's created. For you to just ignore that is your choice. But you surely cannot be too upset when it doesn't turn out to be, you turn out not to reach that goal. But then also I would say
Yeah.
you shouldn't get too down because again, understanding the parameters of which you're taking in the data is the most important thing. But to answer your question a little bit more direct, is like it's a big thing now, and it's affecting everyday movement in clubs. It's affecting week in, week out decisions, and it's just going to get crazier. It's going to get more wild because like AI. now is building or there's already software out there that just through movements on the field and covering, breaking down the space, they're adding more to the parameter list of things that can be logged and captured, you know, and that's good for some and it's not great for some as well.
Yeah. I feel like often within any industry, there's a balance between the human and some other like entity, whether it's production or in this case data, or maybe previously it would be like some other metric, and getting the best out of the human. And when you were kind of talking about, yeah, they might put in an extra sprint at the end of practice or whatever. You hear these stories about people like Hazard or Tarapt or whatever who weren't the most hardworking, I guess, during training is what the teammates will say. But then they show up on the field on match day and they'd be match winners. You played with Schweinsteiger at the end of his career. How, in terms of the coaching staff, and you've got all the data people and the numbers people versus the coaching staff, and they understand the personalities and the players, and maybe Schweinsteiger wasn't running as much, but he's integral to the team because of the quality that he brings. And forget, I didn't really watch that much Chicago Fire at that time. So, but using that as the example, and you can tell me if that wasn't true or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
um, how how did you watch that evolve within? Because you can have a guy that maybe wants to get in the game, and he'll say, "Look, my numbers based on the thing make like I deserve to be in there, but I'm not because." You like this guy better for whatever reason. So like you're data driven, but then except for this one situation, like how does that create situations in the locker room where that's weird? Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Do you expect that to happen more? Like what's your sort of thoughts on those sorts of things?
Yeah. And, I'll start with, Bastian Schweinsteiger. Um, was amazing guy, first of all, amazing teammate. Sure as hell was not running in training. And it was never, I don't think, I wouldn't even be surprised if he was told before he signed his contract, like, we're not going to ask you to run. Like every position he played, for us was a position where he was just dictating the game. And this is the thing that I do have against data sometimes. It's the game calls for different requirements in different positions. And sometimes where one position might lack this skill set, having two that overcompensate and others ultimately can balance things out. But going back to what you said, and then also answering the next part of the question, I feel like it is in a sense where, as a society, we're almost trying to go, or somebody's trying to take us there, right? Because it is getting the most out of the human by making them a robot. Because now with data, we've gotten to this place where we feel like because we can calculate the outcome, as long as you follow that calculation, the outcome is going to be desired. But that is not the case because we're humans, and humans have emotion. So along that process, at some point, yeah, in preseason, 3 weeks before preseason, I was sent a template of, where my fitness level needs to be even considered as an option to play. I beat it. An interesting tactic that is, I don't want to say tactic, but it is a tactic where the next day after training, the numbers are pasted on the wall of the entrance into the locker room. Now, you could easily just send that to me and I can know how I'm doing, but you want it to be out there because it is a mechanism of holding people accountable, right? Treating them like robots, saying there's a standard, da 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 da. But the reaction, like everybody responds differently. And that's the thing about the professional environment. I think it's so type A, so macho oriented that it's like, yeah, well, you don't want to be embarrassed and do better. It's like, well, bro, that that guy, like for instance, me, like there were days where I had to get up earlier to take my kid to practice or to daycare, and then my stepson to school, and it's a Tuesday. The game's on Saturday. I played 90 on like, do I need to exert myself to the fullest extent of my ability right now? Is it beneficial to me? Is it beneficial to my team? Is it beneficial to my well-being? Just so I can come in tomorrow and say, oh, well, I was in the red. Like, that's not one thing. It's like, well, nobody was even in the red today. You guys aren't working hard enough. It is week 17, and we just traveled from, like, there's so many variables that cannot be accounted for in just this GPS chip in my bra, right? And that's where sometimes they adhere to it, but in other cases, like a star player, it doesn't matter. And then that's where it becomes really slippery, right? Because now, what is worse? Ponying up a certain list of values and pillars that you're holding, and you're berating guys every day, week in, week out, saying they have to adhere to this standard, and then you so freely throw it out the window in various moments, expecting them not to notice, or doing it knowing very well it's noticed, but then essentially doubling down on and saying, well, this is what you signed up for, so like man up. These things are like the worst mental experiment sometimes. And what's tough is you have people that are not well versed in psychology that are, implementing them, and you see it many times. And the only reason I was able to play as long as I did is because I had my goal, I had my plan, and I was always I would always look at myself first. It actually fucked me over sometimes, right? Like you get, there was one training, I won't say the team, that I was brought the data and was told, you didn't work hard. What's going on? Like, are you okay? Like, what's going on at home? Like, you going out too much or something? I'm like, bro, like, let's look at my data from the last 8 games, which, mind you, I started every one of them. I played, 80 plus in, but what happened? I wasn't scoring as much. So it's like, maybe that's the real reason. Maybe you need to find some kind of way to say, bro, you just ain't scoring. The next guy's up. But I would actually, as a player, I would respect that more than to tell me I'm not this, I'm not that, whatever, whatever. But in those moments, I said, all right, bet. The next day, I'm running my ass off. But then I end up still not starting. And then, okay, slowly but surely, you start to recognize the data is the data. It is there to be used when it needs to be used. And it can be either against you, it can be either for you, but it's nothing but a mechanism, a tool that, ultimately in the game of sports, as the product, they need to ensure they are getting a return on their investment. And this is how they do so.
Yeah. I had a couple of thoughts when you were talking about that. The first was when and when not to apply the data principles, right, with star players. Is I've always been, or it has been my observation that the teams that it's very understood, like this guy is the star and we're going to have to do some extra work to make sure that we're successful, right? Messi is the best example of this, like when they won the World Cup. Um, and I've also been of the opinion that that star has to be like enough of a level above where everyone else is like, okay, fair enough. But if it's not that level, then it becomes that psychological kind of situation like you mentioned. And then the other thing that I thought was interesting was um, when you're talking about the last piece, it's like the data can almost be used as an excuse, right? You don't pay attention to it if you're scoring goals, but if you're not scoring goals, then they can like go find a number that they're like, oh, this is not good enough. Um, and then the last thing thought that I had was, and I've had this conversation with other people on the show before, which is to get to a professional level of a sport or like a musician or an actor or any of these sorts of like very high competitive industries, you have to be the best of the best of the best in the world, and you end up with these personalities that are so driven, they work hard, the competitiveness, all these things where you end up with them like the subset of people that are in there creates a different dynamic than like the rest of the population. Um, And then, so to get that subset of people to then agree, like, okay, this guy is this much better than us, and if we want to win collectively, we'll do some extra running for him. Like, that's such a like strange phenomena, like in my brain, to kind of wrap my head around. I don't have. What do you
I'll
think about?
argue. I'll put it this way: the
Yeah.
only way that works. So the only way it works purely based, my opinion, the only way that works purely based off of ability and skill is any level below the professional environment. When it gets to the professional environment, what also has to be there is a following. What
Hmm.
also has to be there is enough of an understanding of how all those other high value individuals in this area act around that person, right? Because yeah, you score a goal, like yeah, people are friendly, whatever, whatever. But like when Messi walks through the like front offices of my like people, damn near could literally be falling to their knees and weeping and fainting type shit, you know. So that level of impact that those players have on the people around them, I think at the professional level is what's going to dictate what is and what's not allowed. Because I have not been on a team. I mean, maybe Nashville a little bit, like with Hani Mukhtar. That's probably the closest it's been to, because he's also just like a model pro, right? A model guy, like doesn't drink, doesn't party too much, like you know, I'm not saying he's not like a guru in wisdom or anything like that, but like he has his values, he holds them dear. He is in he's maybe not early, but he stays late. He's in the ice tank. He's working on his free kicks. That was the closest I would say for me, but I also understand there is a little bit of a bias there in my sense, right? Because it wasn't a whole team that was just like this guy can do whatever. A lot of it depends on your upbringing, because especially with MLS, you have guys that came up through skill, made it where they were through skill, guys that made it through mentality, guys that made it through physical prowess. You see, so to get the all of those types of people to agree, okay, this guy is so good that I'm not even gonna be, holding him accountable, because that's what it comes down to.
Mm.
They're not holding him accountable in a sense of something, some area of the game in which they're going to ask everybody else on the field to be accountable of. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I haven't seen it at my level in terms of where I've played. Um, but yeah, like the Messi's, and I would say like in Toronto, Bernadeschi and Insigne had that ability to where like there was some times where you knew it was like, okay, if they really just wanted the ball, like you just like sit back and relax. But unfortunately, it wasn't actually converting, and that's another
Yeah.
part. That's another part of it, right? Like it has to convert into something.
Well, that's why I was going to ask, because MLS, it seems like that situation, or somebody tries to create that situation more often than almost all the other leagues, right? You mentioned Toronto, the Bernardeschi and Insigne, when Zlatan went to LA, Carlos Vela, like all these examples, like Robbie Keane and Gerrard back in the day with the Galaxy, um, like all these examples of these kind of star players coming over and then a lot of them don't work to your point. And I think the other thing that you mentioned about Hani is like if people actually like the guy and they're like willing to do like not necessarily not hold them accountable, but like they understand that for to win, maybe he doesn't track back and you do a extra
They're
sprint for
willing.
him.
They're willing to do a little bit of his job so he can go do the job, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it seems like some situations it works and some doesn't. You mentioned biases, and this is my shameless segue into the question from the last guest, because we didn't do it at the beginning. But he says, are how open are you to changing your mind, and what cognitive biases do you realize you have in your day to day?
Uh, I would say I'm actually getting that's a great question, because I'm getting hit with things this past like year of my life that, are exposing areas that I didn't of myself that I didn't actually have to like be open-minded in, put it that way, right? So, for instance, I as a, growing pro soccer player, I was just like, yeah, no matter what, you just play, and as long as you work hard and you do like everything that and I still am a firm believer in that, but I now understand it looks different than what you think it's going to look like. And then like that's probably the biggest thing for me, which I've done. I pat myself on the back for this one because I've done better than any other person I know in my life of understanding the path can be murky and almost accepting it and almost like welcome like to the point now where like when it gets very tough and like I get to that point where I think I'm gonna like break, I get a surge of excitement and I'm able to now hold on to visions of what it can be like. And where I'm very, very fortunate is I have deposited memories and feelings of like really, really good feelings. So it's like I can always revert back to those things and remember like, oh shit, like I have done this before, right? Like 7 games of not scoring and it's a home game and it's big and you're starting and you literally there's gonna be 20,000 people way like that. And a lot of them are like, yo, Sapong needs to score. And like running that through you, letting that is a fact. It is a fact, period. You just try to not think about it. But of course, as you get closer and closer to that time, like some days before games, like I couldn't even really chill. It was like, damn, like I have to score. Like to the point where I didn't even care if we won or not. I have to score. I have to score today, you know? And being able to get to a place where towards the end of my career, my earlier self, my younger self would probably like scoff at that player who was like, whatever's going to happen today is going to happen. I'm going to try my best. I don't ever go on the field not trying my best. Maybe that's all I need to ask of myself, especially if I feel like I take it off of the field and, in my endeavors, whether it's try to be my best or try to make people their best, like I like I said, I haven't met anybody besides me that has been able to go into a game with that kind of spirit to leave no matter what happens and still be able to, get up the next day and work towards, you know, growing plants, vegetables, or making, youth putting youth in positions to maximize their potential. Um and then the second part I think was like I think that's where I actually developed cognitively at a level that I couldn't have imagined. Like I wasn't good in school. I won't say good. I wasn't good. I just had trouble concentrating. I am not a good student in the sense of the way school is set up is not how life is set up. That is not how life is. You don't just get to take in a bunch of information and then just like take a test. And then if you pass, like you go on to the next level. No, you're going to continue to get the same test with different questions, with different environments. You're going to have to explain your answer in different ways. You're going to have to always show your answer in a way or show your work in a way. Um, but what happens, I think, in professional sports is it can get masked. And that's, it got masked for me up until like maybe my fourth or I think it was like around my third, fourth season, winning MLS Cup, winning Open Cup, becoming a rookie of the year, doing all that and like accomplishing what I literally dreamed of, you know, so quickly and then realizing, well, shit, bro, you got to do it again. You got to do it again. If you don't keep doing it, then eventually people are just going to forget that you did it. And then what?
Yeah.
And then having to, yeah, so it's an interesting one, but I definitely am thankful for, getting to that space. And that just happens through time and scarring, lots of ups and downs.
Talk to the what you mentioned about maybe earlier in your career you would have been like, I have to score and I don't even care if we win. The mindset of So I'm a defender or midfielder, so I don't really have that on myself where I feel like I need to go score. Like for me, it's like win my 50-50s, keep the ball. Like you don't got to do anything special. Like do your job so the attackers can go win the game for you basically is like how I think about it. It's like if I do my job, then I give the attackers a platform to do their job and then I've done my piece. And if it doesn't work out today, it doesn't work out and then like so I don't have that level or that sort of thing going around in my own mind. When you're dealing with like you mentioned a big home game or like on ESPN or whatever, somebody's like, "Oh, like this is a big MLS playoff game. CJ hasn't scored in however many games or whatever. Like, is he gonna show up tonight?" How are you watching that? How are you preparing from the mental side? Because I would imagine it would be very easy to get in your own head and then just completely capitulate
Yeah.
from like all the people you've got. Maybe if you're at home and the fans start booing because you've lost a couple games in a row or like what and you're like this is supposed to be home like we're supposed to be feeling the love here and like but we're not playing well like we need the support but at the same time you get it because it's like well they want to see us win and we're not like how do you go through all of that.
Yeah. You just get used to it. It doesn't get easier. You just get used to it. And then, if you're fortunate, there will be moments in which it I mean, really it's either stroking your ego or deflating it, right? Because it's still just a soccer game.
Yeah.
That was a hard one for me to even be able to like I couldn't even say that what I just said out loud, bro. Like it took me 8 years to even be able to be in a place to where I could just say, you know what, it is just a soccer game. And it wasn't until I started seeing things happen around the world. It was like I remember again around third, fourth season doing all those things so fast and being so revered on social media and having, people contacting you, that also meant they were, I now was a little jaded in like who actually gave a fuck, and
Mm.
there was still a part of me that like wanted to have value for who I am and not what I do, so, I remember the earlier stages of my career. Sometimes like there was one time before a playoff game walking back into the locker room um, before going back out for like or coming in from the warm-ups, and I passed the stadium. Like I passed a room, like a communications room, so it was like a basically not part of the locker room, and I just happened to catch the TV, and it was like me like during the warm-up, and but it was a good stat. It was like, oh, rookie or was the 2011 rookie of the year. Or no, it wasn't a good stat. Sorry. It was only 4 goals this season. I had only 4 goals up until then. And I remember just being like, oh, like just like I immediately thought of all my friends and family that are watching. And then like I somehow disappointed them, because but what does it come from? It comes from everybody's yearning to have value in some way, shape, or form. Like we don't always know exactly how that is, but for me, in that sense, at that moment, I was representing all these people that loved me and knew me, and I had to put the city on the map and all these things that again, just shit you just make up, But ultimately, ended up scoring that game, and some would. It would make for a really cool story, say like I saw that and I decided I was gonna score and then I scored. It was like, no, because once the whistle blows, if and that this is where I would say this is how I know I a professional soccer player, and I know even now I probably could have some kind of value. It's those who can allow all those things to dissipate when the whistle blows. Because if you truly, and it comes from passion and just love of the game as well, but you do it well enough, long enough, right? Nothing else matters except the game when you're in it. And that's the freest we feel, right? And that's actually the feeling that I'd say that's why we take all the bullshit, That's why we go through it every week. And that's why it also like really messes with guys if they don't get to play, So yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean that makes sense. I was just doing a quick Google on the teams that you'd play for because I didn't remember how often you'd moved around. But so you got all this. So I want to set for the people listening. So all everything he just described, and then also trying to build a family at home. How do you separate the two? I'd imagine that it would be easy to come home after you maybe didn't play well, or even if you didn't play well and the kids are at home and you got to like put it aside. Or by the same token, you've played well and something happened. The wife was like, oh, in a bad mood or whatever, and you have to like put that aside as well, which I can imagine is even more difficult to a certain extent because you're on a high, you scored 2 goals, whatever. You're like, yeah, we won, blah blah blah, and you come home and it's like, oh. But then you got to put it aside because at the end of the day, the human and the relationship and the family, to your point, it's just a soccer game, and these people are going to be around, hopefully, fingers crossed, for the rest of your life. And so having that kind of perspective, how do you deal with that along with the moving around? You go on loan for to from this team to that team, Nashville to Toronto. It's like not even at all similar places. Like, what's it like to kind of balance those two things?
It is unbalancing. It is destabilizing. It is and I think I'm different. I'm very different in the sense that I a long time ago decided I was always going to try and find silver lining within things because it would be easy to, and I wouldn't even say like this person is wrong. It's easy to say, oh, families first, which I agree with, right? Or is to say, it's also easy to say, well, no, this is my career and this is what supports my family. You can find whatever you want to support your own claim, right? I think what it comes down to is understanding home should be where your heart is, right? And I always use it as an opportunity. I'm actually very thankful because my daughter was so used to me not being home every night. And like it's so that one in itself is so hard to say. It's like, what? It's like, yeah, like all you're doing is setting them up for failure. If you met them believe they got you at arm's reach every single night. Like great to be there for them, and especially I'd say like first four. Read this book, Parenting in and Out. They say the first 1,000 days. So like in the first 1,000 days of my daughter's, life, like okay, 17 weekends out of a year I'm gone. You know, it's like really not that much, but in the time as you're going through it, it seems like it's so much. Like for my wife, it's like, oh, you're traveling again. You have another away game. It's like, look, I'm going 1,000 miles down that way, and I'll be back about 36 hours, and then we get 3 days. You know, and then what's interesting about people and what we do is like when, especially like families in professional sports, right? Like my kids weren't old enough to really feel like any of that, like it's not really jitters, but it's just like preparation for the game, right? Like my wife had to prepare herself knowing on Friday when I leave in the morning, she's not going to see me till Sunday morning, right? She had to prepare her mind for that. And so the days even before that, it's either communication of how the weekend's going to go or, maybe, different energy because she knows that that's coming. And then same on my end. It's like knowing I'm about to go on a 3-game road trip. Now I'm like, well, let me take her out somewhere. Let me try and find something I can do to make her feel. Let me take on more responsibility here. And that is what commitment is. And that's the big that is the best lesson anybody can get. I will say it's hard to balance that and commit to a sport too. It's not impossible, but it just requires so much more that I think towards the latter years of my career, I do believe it affected my performance in the sense of I couldn't just think about myself. And that's natural. And I've seen guys that I think were able to really maneuver that very well to the point where they were able to use that energy and have it make them put more into the game, right? And I was saying in those moments, for instance, I had a guy I played with. He had a 9-year-old kid, a 6-year old boys, right? His wife, like, you know, she was very she relished in the opportunity to be that support system for him, to the point where, like, I mean, every school, every day she's taking him to school. When he gets home, she's getting him out the room so he can take a nap. Game day, she's, getting him up, getting him ready, making sure he doesn't have to think or do anything. And so when that guy goes on the field, he's thinking about them. He's like, I gotta fight, grind, tooth and nail so I can keep putting food on that table, so I can keep her happy, And every time he scores or he makes a good move, he's looking right to them. Like, he walks to the field, he's looking for them. They're going nuts. His kids are running on the field, like, after the game and stuff, so, like, that energy. And I just couldn't get to that level just because my kids were so young. Like, I had a
Hmm.
newborn basically. And then my stepson was like 3 or 4. Like, all he wanted to do was be in the babysitting room, where the toys are at. Like, he don't even want to watch the game. So it's like, I I think if a player can get past that stage, because, bro, that 1 to 2 to 3 and 4 years old stage is a tough one to navigate regardless. And then you add doing a high level job where, like, you know, I mean, some day after games, sometimes you're doing autographs. It's like your kid's nose is running because it's cold. They got school in the morning. Like, your wife has been at it for 8 hours now. Like, she just wants to get home and get to bed. And then as you're leaving, somebody, oh, here you go, puts a marker in your hand, and it's like, people don't recognize this too, but it's in our contracts. Like, we have mandatory signing sessions, right? Unpaid. Like, yeah, we get appearances and all that, but to sign our contract, you're saying you definitely are going to do this for us at least a couple times.
Yeah.
And they'll tell you beforehand, hey, just let you know, this game, you gotta, so I'll say it is tough. It's tough. And family in general, especially for us men, if we want to be more modern day thinkers, but then we want to provide all the traditional things, and those two don't mesh in
No,
general,
not very
and
well.
not at all, at all, right? And we create all these things to, like, make it work, and we try to, you know, and then we're also trying to play, like, not play, but we're also trying to be in touch with emotions, which most of us in our, at least our generation, have no men around us that do that.
Yeah.
No older men that has ever done that around me, and I'm supposed to now know how to. But I tried, but we tried, right? And that's more the modern sense. But then we still want to be traditional and making sure, the oil change, the tires is good before the road trip, mow the lawn, get the bugs, go up in the attic, fix the air conditioner, all these different things. It's like, it doesn't, you can't. And I think that's what happened to me like towards the end of my years. It's like, I know I should probably stay an extra hour to do my treatment the right way, get a massage, do the ice bath, roll out this calf that's been, but kids get out in 20 minutes. Wife is coming back from school. It's going to be close. Like, if I don't do this, I got to pay the babysitter a little bit more. So it's just like a whole new wealth of, like, algorithm and solutions that need to be found. And, it's hard unless you make so much money that you just have a nanny and they're going to take care of everything. It's a tough one to navigate for sure.
Yeah. All right. We've touched on a lot of the negative or rough parts or kind of the behind the scenes type things. I will say when I was playing Arena and we were doing the signings after the game, seeing some kid come up and like you made his day because you signed a shirt or whatever is like that is super like rewarding for me. I can imagine or understand if you're doing it all the time, it might get a little bit
There's
less
always that.
less
There's
fun.
always that.
But generally speaking, that was one of my favorite parts of doing it. Um, First U.S. national team camp or call up. What was it like getting the call?
Ooh. Man, I I was like, Mama, I made it. I made it. Like that was, and it's a great question because I think I didn't know it then, but ultimately that is the one call and one moment that like I'll probably remember it forever. But just the ability or the experience of like fulfilling a dream, representing the national team, so dope. And the guy at the time was Jurgen, so it's just like just a wild experience with like his accent, like and talking to this guy that like I didn't really watch him a lot, but like definitely knew of him. Played a couple rounds of FIFA with him. So it was that added to it for sure. Definitely a highlight of my career.
What's that process like? Are you aware beforehand, or do they just call out the guys that they want? Is it random, or is it like, because I'd imagine, all right, I'd imagine like for the guys that know, they're in contact with the, like for now, like at this current day, Pulisic is like in contact with the coach, and he knows like, oh, I need to rest because of yada yada. Like he's in contact whether he's going to be in camp or not. But for a guy like you, is this complete surprise, or are you
No,
kind of
no,
aware?
no. I knew for 3.5 weeks before they announced it. Because they announced it like closer to the date of like actually reporting to camp,
Okay.
but they got to make sure like you ready for that shit. Like I had a whole meal plan and lifting plan before my first camp, before they announced my name. So yeah, we definitely
So
know.
so what's he say? He gets on the phone. He's like, CJ, you're going to the national camp, and you're like,
Yep. And while you get through all that, yeah, and then it's all right. So we're gonna send you this 3.5 week plan. We need you to be fit enough when you get here because it's gonna be intense. Here's your meal plan too. You need to stay away from this, that, and the other. So it's like it's into it. I don't know how I'm sure every coach is different, but for me that my personally my that experience was like I mean, it's dope though, because you're like, oh shit, all right. Like I training, I still wasn't ready for what camp was actually ended up being. But again, that was Jurgen is known to, I mean, Germans in general, right? Like, there's always going to be a emphasis on the fitness, and I got called in after my first season, so it's like I hadn't been a pro for a long time, and all of a sudden I'm like with the best of the best. So it was nerve wracking, and I mean, I I think it was hard for me because like the fitness one, and then like being around all these older guys and being the new face. Like there weren't really any other younger guys in my camp, right? Like I felt very young, it was treated as such. If like I literally just in the last season was still picking up cones and cones and flags off of the field after training. Like back in those days, like we were making the Gatorade before training. Like
yeah, yeah,
we
you've dumped the
literally had,
packets in.
yeah, you get the mix. Hey, don't mess the mix up today. You're gonna hear it. You're gonna hear it from your teammates if you mess up that mix.
Oh my
Who made
gosh.
it today? Like, yeah, yeah. So, I was in there being treated like a full on professional. Yeah, amazing experience.
First training session, the level, the jump from, so you've gone from college a year or two before, finish your first season as a pro, first national team session. How do you remember? Like, was there an, oh damn, like I need to be better to be ready for this, or like you
Yeah,
settled
for
into it?
sure.
Yeah.
But what fucked me over was like I wasn't expecting. Um, Jurgen was a big proponent of 3 sessions a day, and right before I think it was like maybe the night before the first training, he like told us we were going to be doing 3 days, and so that next morning we got up at 6 a.m. to do. He was like, "Yeah, but the first session, guys, it's not gonna be crazy. It's just a 3 mile run, nothing crazy." Oh, okay, all right. So the first session was a 3 mile run, 6 a.m. And I mean, it wasn't that bad, but what messed me up is like I said, everybody has their meal plan. They find out the exact like they do like gene testing and like your shake is different than the next shake and the next shake and the next shake. Like they put everything that they through whatever testing they've done with you says is going to maximize like your is going to be the maximum benefit for you. And I chugged down this shake that just tasted awful, and it just did not sit with me well, man. And I remember going to lay down, like, oh, like just went on a run. I had a cramp. They like literally, they're like, you finish the shake before you leave. Like you cannot leave until you finish the shake. I'm like, dang, like chug this thing down. I literally remember walking in at like into my room. It was probably like 7:37 at this time, and like I was just like, yo, wait, hold up, like full. I'm full. I got a cramp still. And I remember I'm just gonna lay. I'm just gonna take this like lay. And as soon as I swear, as soon as I laid my head down, my alarm was going off, talking about, yep, you got to be in the van because the next training was at 10,
Uh-huh.
but we had to drive 15 minutes to the field, which meant we left 10 minutes earlier because nobody wants to be late. So like I put my head down and it was like an hour and a half later, it felt like it was 2 minutes. And I was up getting ready for this first session. And I just remember still kind of like out of it and like it was so quick. And, you know, after a couple of days, you get more used to it. And like what it really is the fact that you're with a bunch of different players, a bunch of new players, you know. And once you start getting to learn their tendencies and learning, a little bit more about them, more dinners together, that's when I was able to like start easing into it.
That makes sense. All right, first appearance, pulling on the U.S. shirt. Um, what's the feeling? So I like, well, I'll just leave it at that. What's the
Yeah,
feeling getting
yeah,
into the
yeah.
game?
So my first game was against, I want to say it was Venezuela. It was either Venezuela or Panama. And I didn't go in until
Venezuela.
Venezuela. Okay. Um, I went in, and so we played in Phoenix, and like big stadium, like crazy fans. And again, it's just different because I'm used to like at that point I was used to like the light blue sporting Kansas City colors. Like I mean, members of the like supporters section literally took me out for barbecue. Like they took me on a barbecue tour of Kansas City before I played a game. So it's like you see them, like you know them, and then I just remember like seeing the red, white, and blue. I'm like, damn, like this is different. And like I didn't get in until maybe like past the 80th minute. And I swear I probably touched the ball one time. I just remember being just running. And I ran here. I almost blocked that. But like now where I'm at in my career, I was just that sub that came on and ran around for like 2 minutes. But it was fun. It was fun to have the
Yeah,
jersey on and like the fans screaming and the pictures afterwards. I remember the Panama game. I like had more touches and this that, and other. But yeah, like really, it was such a whirlwind. I look back at now and I just laugh because I didn't do shit in the game. I had no effect on the game whatsoever. Like I literally just went out there and just ran. I was like, oh
yeah.
well, I got some
But
cool pictures out of it though.
yeah, you got a cap and a picture. Nobody can take that away from you at all. Oh, all right. I know we're running a bit short on time, so I want to maybe do a few like quick hit type questions. So we'll go best moment of your career or moments, I guess.
Ooh, okay. Obviously, number one is MLS Cup. I think just the story of getting there. I had actually gone on loan in the middle of that season, I want to say. Yeah, in the middle of that season, I went on loan to Orlando City and came back just in time for playoffs. Played all three playoffs. Um, MLS Cup, the freaking bitter winner of Kansas City, and going into PKs, and that one was just surreal. Um, I think another memorable moment would definitely be like getting to um be a part of MLS's marketing day. So MLS every season they do their marketing day. They take the top marketed players on every team, bring them to LA. You do appearances, commercials, events. You get paid well. It just get treated like freaking royalty, basically. Um, I did that one 2019, and it just happened to be the year the league started their partnership with Body Armor. And so an event we did, Kobe Bryant was there,
Oh,
and it actually was, man, crazy. It was like 3, 4 weeks before he passed, before his accident, like
yeah.
literally. Um, but it was big for me because he's the one who really like planted the seed of like estate building and planning and wealth development and talking about owning a trust and like how to look at after the game as well. Hearing Kobe Bryant, because like competitor, man, like almost like psychotically competitive, and to see and hear the true wisdom in his voice, right? Like I think I just at that time I remember I mean being an athlete myself and maybe not really having as much faith in my own value. But it's like I just thought he was just a basketball player, But then all of a sudden he's talking about like things that I'd never heard of, some things that I had heard of, and like had this like wisdom and calm to his experience that like was very wild for me to see because I had always known him as this guy that's just like freakishly obsessed over basketball, and hearing him say like, "Oh man, like I, I'm so glad that like now that the game's over for me that I'm in this position. Like it's I've learned a lot through it, but like you know he almost kind of like admitted that he was maybe a little too over the top, and but he saw it as his way to be in the position where he was then to make sure he could build something for his family and even at that time he had already set up. I think he owned his equity in body armor and like shares and like had already deposited some of them into his daughter's or his trust with his daughter as a beneficiary. And he was even at the level of where he took his equity in shares because he knew he ultimately was going to be able to leverage those shares later. So even in
Mm,
his own movements, right? Like I even know, like I actually have somebody who I know who, they became friends with the family and like they got offered shares, like as a part of some kind of business arrangement. So he was very next level in that sense, in that regard. And yeah, I just like it was just weird being able to talk to like somebody that you idolize at like a regular person, and he was just so chill and humble and down to earth, and like, and then I learned like he act like saw him pass a couple, make a couple passes. I was like, damn, dog, you don't look like the typical, super uncoordinated. And it's like, oh yeah, no, I lived in Italy for a little bit when I was younger. I was like, what? Like,
yeah, man.
bro, did a whole interview in Italian right next to me. I'm like, all right, it's like that was a very very cool experience as well,
Yeah. He was gone way too soon, 100%.
man.
Um,
Yeah.
I said this on the show to one of my friends, he's a college basketball coach now, that you could make the argument that he was going to do more like in the post basketball than he did
Oh,
during basketball. And for I like that's one that actually I was like you see people in the news pass like he was one that I was actually sad about. Still am so a lesser extent, but yeah, he was going to do great things. I think, and to what you're alluding to, I want to hit two quick questions. One, best player or players that you played with. Like you saw him do something on the training field, and you're like,
yeah,
oh my
yeah, yeah.
gosh.
This one, because I've been asked it before, and like it's funny because I think my answer changes every time, but just because we were talking about him earlier, like Hani Mukhtar is the best soccer player I've played with. Just all around soccer player. You know, obviously as you're older, you take more variables into account. Is like there was games where he didn't do shit, you know, because
Yeah, yeah.
he but like all around skill, pound for pound, mentality, how they love the game, like that's what I see, you know, as a soccer player. I'll give him that one. Like my CJ's own opinion drenched uh uh explanation of, you know, best player. But then like there were some guys that I played with that like just skillfully. There was a guy in Philly I played with named Ilsinho. Have you ever heard of this name?
Yeah, FIFA.
Oh my God, bro. This guy, nah, I've never seen a more skillful. I mean, there's literally clips of him like snaking Roberto Carlos, like in, you know, the Brazilian league, like way back when. But like man's just loved the game so much, but would not run for shit. Like, but you know, fans loved him though because they knew anytime he got on the ball, some wild shit was about to happen. And ironically, one of his best highlights is snaking uh a snake to Meg on Bastian Schweinsteiger before just fucking ripping it far post. Like that clip lives in infamy in Philly to this day. And like I'll never forget like being in the stadium because you couldn't really start him because he just like wasn't gonna last. Like he was I guess a little older at the time, and like anytime he got the ball, everybody would just stand up. We would just all be on this. Yo, yeah, he Ilsinho did some things to some guys in training that like literally had guys fighting other guys because they would just like stop playing of how bad like he would like the Megs. Like he megged we were playing like small sided one time and he megged one of my teammates so bad that I just like holy shit. And I just like walked off. And my teammate wanted to fight me after training. Like, yo, like what's
Yeah, that's so crazy. Oh, I love hearing the anecdotes like that, even like from guys on other podcasts. Like, I don't know if you saw the clip from Kevin Prince Boateng when he's talking about Messi doing the shooting. He was like, he scores 99 out of 100, and he's yelling at Ter Stegen to save it. He's like, I can't. Um, it was
that's
like,
a good one. That's a good
yeah, that clip is it's actually very funny. For people listening, if you're at all interested, that interview is actually he's a funny guy, Boateng is, and it's actually quite insightful. I would say as well. But it's a good listen. All right, and last but not least, so what's next for you then? Next 3 to 5 years, you've got several businesses that we didn't really get into um, today, unfortunately. But if you want to give the people a quick rundown of what you got going on and kind of things that you got planned, things to look out for, this will be, I guess, well, we're a little bit over time, but plug whatever you want to plug.
Yeah,
Tell the
yeah,
people what
yeah.
you got going on, and and we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, no doubt. So I'd say I'm still chasing the game. Haven't quite hung up the boots, but regardless, we'll continue to do work and player support, really. I think that's my calling. And, you know, right now, through a company that I am part owner of called Social Sports, which is more of like the higher level, pro level, being able to bring different brand business development concepts while providing wealth, estate planning, and building services. But then, you know, I think something that I'm really enjoying is exploring being able to inject myself into the youth space and like now try and develop good people as well as good players, right? You can kind of see the game moving in a place to where there's just more value and more eyes and interest. And my fear and what I have seen is a lot of players begin to define themselves by the game. And, you know, just the natural law of averages is not everybody's going to make it. And so, you know, through a program I'm starting, the Visionary Athlete Program, I'm starting to bring a little bit of a holistic mindset to the player development and, you know, tapping into mental strength and mindfulness and visualization and ultimately just providing a support. Really, it's support at every level of the game is where I know I'm going to be once I do hang up the boots, and definitely looking forward to pursuing that and implore anybody that is interested to reach out and see how we can continue to create a platform that's going to ensure that we are taking care of these kids as they go through this, because it's cutthroat out there. And kind of like a lot of the concepts we've spoken about is like you have a modern game that's getting more modernized, and we still have a lot of traditional mindsets and concepts that run things. So it's important that we bridge that gap and make this uh, a seamless transition, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. For those listening that are interested, I'll put the links to all of CJ stuff in the description. Um, yeah. Any last nickels before we get you out of here?
Hey man, I'll just give you your props. Continue to, have this platform, and I know you do stuff with the youth, and hopefully we'll be doing some stuff, but it's important to know, even for the viewers as well. I can imagine, like, growing up, I wasn't the best player by any means. I was very good, but I think my mentality and then a lot of luck led me to where I'm at. But in this time, I've come back and I've connected with a lot of people who, I quite frankly, in the throes of my career, it might have not even been a conversation that would have been had or been able to be explored. But I'm in a position now where I recognize, like, everybody plays such a vital role in this game. And why I think it's extra poignant with soccer is because soccer is a global sport. It is a sport that many cultures, traditions, and types of people can agree on something, right? And whether it's the passion they put into it or, just the game itself, it brings us all together to a place where everybody is valuable, and anything that anybody can do. And when I see people like in the, gutter coaching 4 nights a week, I'm like, keep going, because it can be that one kid that comes through the system, and that could be that one kid who after their career is trying to come right back and continue making the movement. So yeah, little props to you, man, and looking forward to seeing what we can continue to build on.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a great way to wrap it up. Uh, guys, thanks for listening as always, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.